The elevator doors slid open on the 45th floor of Zhang Industries, and everyone inside held their breath. Dominic Zhang, the infamous Wolf of Wall Street meets Asian Tiger CEO, stepped in, 6 feet of tailored perfection and calculated cruelty. His cold gaze swept over his employees, who pressed themselves against the elevator walls. But in the back corner stood Mei Lin, newly arrived from her small village in Yunnan province, unaware that the man whose coffee she'd accidentally spilled that morning was the same man who now controlled her fate. When the elevator jolted, sending her tumbling into his arms, nobody expected what happened next. Instead of firing her on the spot, Dominic Zhang looked truly surprised for the first time in his life. If you're ready to experience a story of unexpected love, healing from past wounds, and discovering that sometimes the strongest people are those with the gentlest hearts, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very end. This tale of the cold-hearted CEO and the sunshine girl who changes his world will have you reaching for tissues one moment and smiling the next. Mei Lin had never imagined herself in Shanghai, let alone working as an assistant at one of China's most prestigious corporations. Growing up in a rural village where electricity was still considered a luxury, her dreams had been simple: help her family, maybe teach at the local school. But when her father's medical bills threatened to destroy everything they had, Mei took the only path available, a job offer from her distant cousin in the big city. "Remember, keep your head down and do your work," her cousin had warned. Especially around Dominic Zhang. "He's half Chinese, half American, and completely ruthless. They say he fired his own uncle for being 5 minutes late to a meeting." Mei had nodded obediently, but she'd never been good at fearing people. Growing up poor taught her that kindness cost nothing, and that even the harshest people were often carrying the heaviest burdens. Her first morning in Shanghai had been a disaster. Lost in the maze of skyscrapers, running late, and then colliding with a stranger carrying important documents, spilling coffee all over his immaculate white shirt. The man had stared at her with such intensity that she'd blurted out, "I'm so sorry. My grandmother always said I had 2 left feet and the coordination of a newborn calf." Then she'd done the unthinkable, reached up with her handkerchief and dabbed at his chest, not realizing who he was or how inappropriate her gesture might seem. Dominic Zhang had been called many things in his 35 years: brilliant, ruthless, cold-blooded, cunning, but never had anyone treated him with such unguarded naturalness. As the elevator now carried them upward, he found himself studying the young woman who had crashed into his life twice in one day. "You're new," he stated flatly, his voice carrying the slight American accent from his university years at Harvard. The other employees in the elevator looked horrified that he'd singled her out. Mei, however, simply smiled, a genuine, warm expression that seemed out of place in the steel and glass tower. "Yes, sir. First day. I'm Mei Lin, from Yunnan province. I'm very sorry about your shirt this morning." The elevator had gone completely silent. No one spoke directly to Dominic Zhang unless spoken to first, and they certainly didn't remind him of their mistakes. To everyone's shock, the corner of Dominic's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but the closest thing to it anyone had seen in years. "You owe me a shirt," he said as the doors opened on the executive floor. "And a coffee. My office, 15 minutes. As he strode away, the other employees stared at Mei with a mixture of pity and fascination. "You're dead," whispered one woman. "No one goes to his office and comes out with their job intact." But Mei just straightened her simple dress, the best she owned but clearly not designer like those of her colleagues, and nodded. "Then I better find him the best coffee in the building." What Mei couldn't know was that Dominic Zhang had been having the worst year of his already complicated life. The company he'd built from the ground up was thriving, but his personal life was in shambles. His fiancée had left him for his supposed best friend, claiming Dominic was incapable of love. His estranged father was trying to re-enter his life after 20 years of absence. And the board of directors was pressuring him to soften his image. The bully CEO nickname was starting to affect stock prices. When May entered his office exactly 15 minutes later, carrying not just coffee but a small bag of what appeared to be homemade cookies, Dominic was on the phone, berating someone in fluent Mandarin that shifted seamlessly into English and back again. "Place it there and leave," he said, covering the mouthpiece. But May did something no employee had ever done. She waited until he finished his call, standing patiently by his desk. "I thought I told you to leave," he said, eyeing her with curiosity rather than anger. "My grandmother also taught me that when you wrong someone, you stay to make it right. I cannot replace your shirt right now, but I brought these." She placed the small package of cookies on his desk. "They're walnut cookies. I made them last night." Dominic stared at the simple paper package, then at the young woman who stood before him without a trace of the fear he was accustomed to seeing. "Do you know who I am?" "You're Mr. Zhang. The boss. The man whose shirt I ruined, and the one my cousin says can fire people with just a look." She smiled again, that disarming expression. "But my father says judging people by rumors is like trying to know the ocean by looking at a single drop of water." Something stirred in Dominic's chest, an unfamiliar feeling he couldn't immediately identify. Later, he would recognize it as the first crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. "Tell me, Mei Lin from Yunnan province, why are you in Shanghai? You don't belong here." He didn't say it cruelly, merely as an observation. "My father needs heart surgery. The job here pays enough to help him." Her directness was refreshing in a world where everyone calculated their words around him. Dominic studied her for a long moment, then made a decision that would change both their lives. "You're now assigned to my office. My assistant needs help. Be here at 7 a.m. tomorrow." That night, Dominic found himself eating the walnut cookies while reviewing quarterly reports, something he'd never done before. They tasted like memories he'd never had, of a home he'd never known. The following weeks established a pattern no one at Zhang Industries could comprehend. Mei Lin, with her provincial accent and drugstore makeup, became the only person who could enter Dominic's office without knocking. She organized his chaos, anticipated his needs, and most bafflingly, made him explain his more ruthless decisions. "Why fire the entire department?" she'd asked one afternoon, bringing him tea instead of coffee because she'd noticed he hadn't been sleeping well. "They failed to meet targets 3 quarters in a row," he'd replied automatically. "And you believe starting fresh is easier than fixing what's broken?" There was no judgment in her voice, merely curiosity. The question had lingered with him all day, and for the first time in years, Dominic had reversed a decision, instead implementing a restructuring plan. The office rumors spread like wildfire. Some said May must be blackmailing him. Others suggested more scandalous connections. The truth was both simpler and more profound. In May's presence, Dominic remembered the person he'd wanted to be before life had hardened him. On a rainy Tuesday, exactly 1 month after May had started working directly for him, Dominic found her crying quietly in the small staff kitchen during lunch. "What happened?" he demanded, unused to seeing her anything but positive. She quickly wiped her eyes. "Nothing, Mr. Zhang. Just a letter from home. My father's condition is worsening, and the surgery has been scheduled sooner than expected. I'm trying to figure out how to send more money." Without hesitation, Dominic pulled out his phone. "What hospital?" "Sir, I can't accept." "You can and you will. Consider it an advance on your salary." His voice left no room for argument, but his eyes held something new, concern. That evening, as Shanghai's lights glittered against the night sky, Dominic drove May home to her cousin's small apartment on the outskirts of the city. The silence between them was comfortable until May spoke. "Why does everyone fear you so much, Mr. Zhang? You can be kind when you choose to be." Dominic's hands tightened on the steering wheel. No one had asked him such a direct personal question in years. "Kindness is a luxury in business. My American father taught me that before he abandoned my mother and me." The lesson was reinforced at every turn. That sounds very lonely, May said simply. When they arrived at her That sounds very lonely, May said simply. When they arrived at her building, Dominic made a decision. Tomorrow night is the company's annual charity gala. You'll attend as my personal assistant. May looked down at her simple clothes. I don't have anything suitable to wear. That will be taken care of. Be ready at 6 p.m. The next evening, when Dominic arrived at May's apartment, the woman who emerged was still undeniably May. She had refused heavy makeup and complex styling from the team he'd sent, but the simple blue gown highlighted a natural elegance no designer label could create. At the gala, the contrast between them couldn't have been more stark. Dominic in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, moving through the crowd with practiced charm that never reached his eyes, May with her unaffected warmth, genuinely interested in every person she met. The company's biggest client, an older Japanese businessman known for his traditional values, spent an hour talking with May about rural farming techniques while ignoring the executives who had been courting his attention for years. Your assistant understands something you do not, Zhang-san, the man said later. Business is ultimately about people, not just profits. I'll sign the contract tomorrow. That night, as they stood on the balcony of the hotel ballroom, Shanghai spread beneath them like a carpet of stars, Dominic looked at May with new understanding. You're dangerous, you know, he said quietly. Me? May laughed. I'm just a village girl trying to help her family. You make people see possibilities they've forgotten existed. He stepped closer. You make me see them. Later, May would never be able to explain what made her so bold. Perhaps it was the magic of the night, or perhaps it was the glimpse of loneliness she'd seen behind his carefully constructed facade. Whatever the reason, when Dominic Zhang looked at her with unguarded emotion for the first time, Mei Lin stood on her tiptoes and gently pressed her lips to his. The kiss lasted only seconds, but it shattered everything Dominic thought he knew about himself. No one had dared get this close to him in years, emotionally or physically. His relationships had been strategic, emotionless affairs, negotiated like business deals and ended the same way. May stepped back, her eyes wide as she realized what she'd done. I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have. But Dominic had already pulled her back, his kiss deeper this time, decades of suppressed emotion finding release in this one unexpected connection. The following months transformed Zhang Industries in ways no management consultant could have predicted. The bully CEO still demanded excellence, still made tough decisions, but now there was purpose beyond profit. Employees who had feared for their jobs began to take pride in their work. The toxic culture of fear gradually gave way to one of innovation and collaboration. And at the center of this transformation was the unlikely relationship between Dominic Zhang and Mei Lin, a relationship that faced its share of obstacles. Dominic's world didn't accept Mei easily. At executive dinners, her lack of polished manners became fodder for subtle mockery. His former fiancée, regretting her decision to leave him now that his public image was improving, spread vicious rumors about Mei's background and intentions. The board of directors worried that Dominic was becoming soft, and that his personal life was distracting him from the company's goals. For Mei, the challenges were equally daunting. Her family back in Yunnan couldn't understand her new life. Her cousin warned that men like Dominic didn't marry girls like her, they just used and discarded them. And despite Dominic's growing affection, displayed through extravagant gifts and tender moments when they were alone, part of Mei feared they were right. The crisis came 6 months into their relationship, when Dominic's estranged father reappeared, threatening to sell his story to the press. How Dominic's ruthlessness in business mirrored how the senior Zhang had abandoned his Chinese wife and half-American son decades ago. The potential scandal threatened everything Dominic had built. In a moment of panic, returning to old patterns, Dominic shut everyone out, including Mei. He cancelled their plans, buried himself in work, and when pressed by the board about the rural girl, who was becoming too visible in his life, he coldly responded that their relationship was merely a temporary diversion. The words, spoken in a boardroom he thought private, were recorded by his vindictive ex-fiancée and sent directly to May. Heartbroken, May did what the old Dominic would never have expected. She confronted him in his office, tears streaming down her face but her voice steady. "I understand now," she said quietly. "You don't fear failure or weakness, you fear being who you truly are. The real Dominic Zhang isn't the bully everyone fears. He's the man who secretly paid for my father's surgery. The man who remembers how every employee takes their coffee. The man who keeps my homemade cookies in his desk drawer." She placed her resignation letter on his desk. "I love you, Dominic, but I won't be someone's temporary diversion. In my village, we believe the true measure of a person isn't how they treat those above them, but how they treat those who can offer them nothing. By that measure, you're still becoming the man you could be." For 3 days after May left, Dominic Zhang was more tyrannical than ever. He fired 2 executives, cancelled the company's charitable initiatives, and worked through the night, fueled by expensive whiskey rather than May's carefully prepared tea. On the 4th day, he didn't come to the office at all. His executive team feared he might be orchestrating some major corporate takeover. In reality, Dominic Zhang was on a train to Yunnan province, traveling to the small village where May had returned to care for her recovering father. The village's single street, unpaved and lined with modest homes, fell silent as the luxury car rolled in. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts as Dominic, looking out of place in his casual designer clothes, asked directions to the Lin family home. What he found was May, helping her father with his physical therapy exercises in their small garden. She looked up, surprise giving way to wariness as she recognized him. "Mr. Zhang," she said formally, the intimacy they'd shared apparently forgotten. "This is unexpected." Dominic, for the first time in his adult life, found himself speechless. The carefully prepared speech dissolved as he took in the simple beauty of her in this setting, so far from the glass and chrome world he'd built around himself. "Your father's surgery was successful," he finally managed. May's father, a thin man with May's same kind eyes, studied the stranger. "Are you the boss my daughter worked for in Shanghai?" "Yes, sir. I am." Dominic bowed slightly, a gesture of respect he rarely offered anyone. "Then I owe you my thanks. May says your company provided the specialist who saved my life." Dominic's eyes found May's. Even after everything, she had given him credit for her father's recovery rather than blaming him for her heartbreak. "May I speak with your daughter privately?" Dominic asked. The old man nodded, moving slowly back toward the house. Once alone, Dominic and May stood in uncomfortable silence until he finally spoke. "I fired the entire board of directors yesterday." May blinked in surprise. "What? Why?" "Because they wanted me to be someone I'm not." He took a step closer. "Someone I don't want to be anymore." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn paper package, the same one that had once contained her homemade cookies. From it, he produced a simple jade ring. "In Shanghai, I surrounded myself with luxury that meant nothing. Here, you have nothing but what truly matters." His voice, usually so confident, wavered slightly. "I don't know how to do this, May. I don't know how to be vulnerable or how to love without fear. But I want to learn, if you'll teach me." May's eyes filled with tears. "Dominic, a relationship isn't about teaching or learning. It's about growing together." "Then let's grow together," he said simply, holding out the ring. "In Shanghai, or here, or anywhere you want. I just know I don't want to go back to being the person I was before you spilled coffee on my shirt." May looked at the ring, then at the man offering it, not the bully CEO of Zhang Industries, but just Dominic, a man finally brave enough to reach for happiness. "My grandmother had another saying," she said, a smile beginning to form. "She said that love doesn't change who we are, it reveals who we've always been beneath our fears." She stepped forward and, for the second time, dared to kiss the man everyone else had feared. This time, there was no hesitation, no surprise, just the certainty of coming home. 3 years later, Zhang Industries had transformed into a different kind of powerhouse. Still profitable, still demanding excellence, but now known equally for its innovative corporate culture and commitment to rural development. Its headquarters featured a rooftop garden where employees could grow vegetables using techniques from Yunnan province. And in a corner office with windows overlooking both Shanghai's skyline and that garden, Dominic Zhang worked with his wife as equal partners, in business and in life. On his desk sat a constantly replenished jar of walnut cookies, and visitors were often surprised to hear laughter coming from behind his door. The man once known as the bully CEO had found something more valuable than power or profits, the courage to be himself, and the love of a woman who had seen his potential from the start. As for May, she divided her time between the company's rural investment initiatives and caring for their infant daughter, who already showed signs of having her father's determination and her mother's open heart. Sometimes, when the day's meetings were done and Shanghai's lights began to glitter, Dominic would find May in their rooftop garden. "Remembering your village?" he'd ask, knowing she sometimes missed its simplicity. "No," she'd reply, leaning into his embrace. "Remembering how far we've both come." And in those moments, the man who once couldn't allow anyone close enough even for a handshake would hold his entire world in his arms, marveling at how one spilled coffee and one brave kiss had changed everything. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more tales of unexpected.